there's a crew in town. The head hillbillies are making their rounds. Small town whispers loud and clear. The sheriff shot the judge in his chambers chair.
Sheriff got a secret he won't keep. Judge shot dead in his disbelief. A lot of people have some stories to tell. Dark pass away, get the sound of a shotgun shell.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Neighbors hide behind their blinds, whisper tales of troubled minds. Skeletons covering the mountainside, a treacherous reality in the pines.
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight couldn't mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise. All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight could mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise.
all the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Hello, everybody. How are you this evening? Welcome to the show. My name is Elizabeth, and this is Hillbilly Crime. You like the new background? We're going to try this one out. This was, I took this picture the night that the lights went out in Georgia. The night that the lights went out in Whitesburg, we had went down there after our sheriff pew-pewed our judge. The courthouse is just right on this side of down the street some, so we were down there being nosy, I guess. But it turned out to I turned out to get some really good photos that night. How is everybody? Tonight we're going to do back-to-back shows. We've got so much that we want to talk about. So this one we are going to talk about, this is going to be our reaction to the interview from the Alberts, Brian Albert and his wife, and Jennifer McCabe and her husband, and then Brian Albert's brother, Chris Albert. So during the day, we have been watching the Karen Reed retrial. And so most everybody knows she was found not guilty. And there was an interview. Okay, so just to kind of recap what happened with her. So her boyfriend was a cop, a Boston, Massachusetts police officer. they're out at the bar one night, and it seems to me like everybody there is an alcoholic. I mean, that's just like part of their culture is drinking, and they drink a lot. And there were several people out at the bars that evening that all worked together, several different police officers. Well, they all met at the bar, saw each other, were horse playing, you know how guys are, and especially when they're drinking. And they invited John O'Keefe and Karen Reed back to an after party. Well, Karen Reed dropped her boyfriend off at that after party, and she left. Well, now, unbeknownst to her boyfriend, she had been carrying on a flirtatious interaction with another police officer, Brian Higgins. We see the text messages that she was exchanging with this other guy in the trial. He was also at that bar that night. He was with Brian Albert, who we're getting ready to listen to, okay? I think, this is just my opinion, I hope it doesn't bleed the blood. It's just my opinion, though. I think that she dropped him off. He went into the party, ran into Higgins, who she had been having that flirtatious, whatever it was, with. And I think they ended up getting in a fist fight. Okay. He was hit. The cause of death was a blow to the back of his head. And the lady said that it came around the break, the fracture came around to the front. So it even was fractured in the front. But it was the head, the blow to the head is what unalived him. And it looks like they just drug him out to the side, to the curb, and just dumped his body in the snow and left him there, thinking that somebody else would come along and find him, which his girlfriend did. She found him in the snow, and the next thing you know, she's the one who's being accused of hitting him with her car in a blizzard snowstorm and leaving him to just die in the snow, in the cold. Which, listen, I watched the first trial and I watched the second trial. And I was convinced in the first trial that she wasn't guilty. So we're going to pull this up, this interview, and we're going to watch it. Here we go. Let me make sure we got it. Now, I want you guys to pay attention. I also wrote some stuff for this. Let me pull it back up here. Let's see. Oh, I'll pull it up here in a second. We'll go ahead and get this started and we'll listen to it.
The criminal justice system has let us down at every turn. And yesterday was the final letdown. And that's why we're here, because there's nobody left to stand up for us.
Think real long and hard before you're a witness in a case, because no one protects you. And it's very, very sad.
Think long and hard before you're a witness in a case. I don't think it works like that. you know, you're either a witness or you're not a witness. And I'll tell you something that really sticks out to me in this is that they're kind of like, how dare you not believe me? I'm telling you, I already told you what I've told you. How dare you not believe us? That's kind of how I think it comes across.
For the first time, some
We don't want to get any of their stuff in there because we don't want no copyrights.
Jennifer McCabe and high-profile case in town, Karen Reed, accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, John charges, second-degree murder.
All right, now we've already watched that.
I could not be standing here without.
It looked like some days just for that family.
While the prosecutors blamed Reed for O'Keefe's death, the defense said this group of family members framed Reed to cover up what really happened that night.
All right, let me get to the interview.
At some point.
And anyone who's friends with us support cop killers.
Yeah.
After 3+ years, the saga wrapped up yesterday. Reed capped.
I don't want copyrighted, you guys.
Celebrating at dinner.
Today, so I had no plans.
Meanwhile, O'Keefe
Sad for John's family and what happened yesterday, and I feel like they didn't get justice for him, and our lives just changed forever.
Why speak out now after the verdict?
We took what we thought was the high road.
Right.
Let the court do its job.
After a night of hanging out at a local bar in a brutal 2022 blizzard, Brian and his wife Nicole hosted a late-night gathering at their home.
That was video of that night. That was video of the bar where they were at.
An invitation had been extended to Reed and O'Keefe, but Brian Albert says neither of them ever entered his home that night. O'Keefe was found lying unconscious.
Look how handsome he was. And when I looked to see, he was 46 years old. And I don't know how old she is, but she didn't have any children. And he was raising his niece and nephew. His sister had died, and he took in his niece and nephew. And so I'm sure that even though their relationship was as toxic as what it was, or what it seemed to be, I think she helped him a whole lot in just having a female around. You know, because all kids need a mom. Single dads, I mean, they can do it. I've seen plenty of them do it. But I also see plenty of them out there searching for a mommy for those kids, too.
In the snow of Albert's front lawn, he was pronounced dead at the hospital hours later. The defense's theory? A violent altercation at the Alberts' home, possibly involving other members of law enforcement.
Did John ever come in the house?
Never. No,
You never saw John O'Keefe in the house, right?
Never.
never.
These are people in your own community who believe the conspiracy theories, who believe that there were other law enforcement officials and agents involved in this. Why is it people in your own community who believe these conspiracy theories?
You do realize for this conspiracy to be true, it would take 30 to 50 people.
Now, I want to mention here, 30 to 50 people. Yeah, in the entire investigation and the trial, the prosecution, absolutely it takes that many people. But that's not how many people have to actually be in the know of what really happened. The only people that you needed to know anything is that man right there, Brian Albert, and his wife is going to know something. But Brian Higgins, notice that Brian Higgins is absent He is Brian Albert's best buddy, and you don't really see them hanging out that much anymore. I'd say that this case, and it has just ripped their friendship all apart. But all you would need would be him, his wife, and her sister, our best buddy, Jen McCabe. That's really all that you would need. I don't think that Carrie Roberts, Karen Reed's friend, Carrie Roberts, I don't think Carrie Roberts even knows what really happened. I think they lied to her too. And as long as you had that thin blue line and everybody willing to turn a blind eye and never challenge and never question anything, then that's all you need. You don't need 30 or 50 people to be in on the conspiracy. And, you know, it's playing out before our very eyes right now in today's society, that the word conspiracy is not such a far-fetched thing anymore.
You'd have to have multiple cops on 2 different police departments, multiple civilians, the medical examiner, firemen, EMTs, you name it. That's how preposterous and silly this is. And great question. I don't understand how people bought this.
Brian Albert says he and Nicole only found out about John's death when Jen McCabe, who is Nicole's sister, barged into their bedroom.
She was just upset, and I immediately thought something had happened to one of her children or one of my children, because why else is she in my bedroom at 6:30 in the morning right now?
And what did she tell you?
She said, John's out front. I think John's dead out front.
Now that don't make no sense. I want you guys to also pay attention to the fact that this guy who's interviewing him never really says anything. Like, he never asks any follow-up questions or anything.
I said, what the are you talking about, Jen? And I'm like, who? I didn't know.
You still didn't piece it
I
together.
didn't understand what she was talking about, because why would John be out front of my house?
So massively confusing. There are police officers, EMTs on your front lawn. You're an officer. Why don't you just go outside and investigate or take a look?
I'm not a Canton police officer. I'm a Boston police officer. I was just woken up out of a cold sleep from hanging out the night before. By the time I came downstairs, the police were already in my house. John was already gone. There was nobody to save. I would have taken a bullet for John O'Keefe because he was a fellow cop. That's the most ridiculous question that people always ask. It makes zero sense. What am I supposed to do? Run out front in my underwear and start running yellow tape?
See, there's something else. He completely goes from one extreme to the next. You know, he's like, what was I supposed to do? Run out there in my underwear? Well, no, but it is your front yard that your friend is laying out there, passed away. And it doesn't matter if he's a Canton police officer or wherever. Cops are cops. You just heard him say, I would have took a bullet for him. Oh, really? Yeah, because you guys would take a bullet for each other. Same way that Michael Proctor tanked his own career for another cop. The fact that he turned a blind eye and helped another cop not be questioned in a red rum case. Like, we saw his text messages. Michael Proctor was the state police, the lead detective over this case. And he even told his buddies, oh no, this guy's a cop. He's a cop. Oh, we're going to make sure she goes down. He did everything he could to interject himself and destroy his own career in the process.
Around the fire hydrant.
Over the course of the night, Reed called and texted John 52 times. She then called Jen asking for help to find John. Karen previously telling me she and John had gotten into an argument that night. Would you say that you were angry with John that night?
Yes.
Could you have been angry enough and slightly drunk because he had annoyed you that in the fit of rage you just backed up and
Never.
tried to tap him?
Would
Not to
never
try to kill him, but try to...
to tap him with my 6,000-pound full-size SUV, to hit John's body with my car. No.
I spoke with a juror tonight who told me she believes a collision did not occur.
Overall, a lot of the evidence had caused reasonable doubt, and that was enough for us not to convict.
A little after 6 a.m., Karen found John's body in the snow. Jen called 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Does a man pass out in the snow?
Hello?
But what raised eyebrows at Reed's trial was a defense theory about a Google search Jen had made about how long it takes to die in the cold. The defense claiming she searched it before O'Keefe's body was found. So much has been made about that Google search that morning. Was it at 6 a.m. or was it at 6:27 a.m.? How long to die in the cold? What's your answer?
She asked me to do it at outside of Fairview at 6:20, whatever it was. Doesn't matter how much I say about it, people will not believe it.
The group.
I want you guys to pay attention to their facial expressions and the vocal inflections. Now, we are not body language experts. We're not anything like that, okay? But we do have a lot of experience with just normal human behavior, you know. I've got a lifetime of experience with the criminal justice system. And so just as observers only, we're watching this. And so I want you guys to see how convincing this all looks to you. He said for this conspiracy to be true, it would take 30 to 50 people. Now ask yourself, how does the interviewer react to that? Skeptically? Does Brian come off as reasonable or dismissive? Why didn't he go outside? He says, I'm not a Canton cop. I was just woken up. By the time I came downstairs, the police were already in my house. And he said something that caught my ear too. He said, I was woken up out of a cold sleep. Woken up out of a cold sleep. So that I just found that to be kind of odd. Why would you use the word cold? Out of a cold sleep? I don't know. Did his explanation seem plausible? Note any nonverbal cues like hesitations, the tone he uses, eye contact. That's one that you guys are going to pay notice too. His brother Chris has like a whole conversation with the host and never once makes eye contact with him the whole time. It's very strange. It's very strange. Okay, let's listen.
Also hoping to clear up rumors regarding
There's
Albert's
the dog.
dog, Chloe, who had been rehomed after the incident. The defense claimed the dog was involved in O'Keefe's death.
Those wounds.
Now, I'm not going to stop the video on that picture because we don't want to get flagged, but you all just saw it. Those were definitely caused by an animal. But yet the prosecutor in this case was arguing up and down that that was caused by a broken taillight. when she hit him. Now, common sense, anybody who sees that arm can tell that that damage, those injuries were done, had to have been done by an animal. I don't understand how a prosecutor can be not held responsible. Like, if he knows that this didn't happen, how come he's not being held responsible for trying to say the opposite in court? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if a prosecutor knows this is really what happened, but I'm going to argue that this happened instead, don't they have to be telling the truth? Like, isn't that part of accountability? You know, you want the truth.
Were inflicted as the result of a dog attack. Those marks are from teeth.
They've known for 2 years where Chloe is. The state shared it with them.
So if they wanted to take DNA evidence from Chloe the dog and match it to possible DNA evidence on John O'Keefe, they could have matched it.
Absolutely.
But now with
Now, I think that was really, really bad part to put in that, because there was no DNA done. Who was in charge of that investigation? There were no tests done. There were no DNA tests done. I said the same thing. All they'd have to do is swab the wounds and see if that was animal saliva, or, you know, do a DNA test to see if John's DNA is in the dog's mouth. But we're talking years later. This was done. The investigation was run by people who didn't want the truth to come out. So they didn't do anything that was going to prove that they were the ones who did it.
With the trial behind them, they say they're still faced with threats against them and their families, but hope to continue calling this community their home.
You get down, you get depressed, and it's like, but this is the town we grew up in. Like, we didn't do anything wrong. We all contributed to our town. We love our town. Why should we have to go anywhere?
Okay, now that was Chris Albert. This must not have been the full interview. That must not have been the full interview. Okay. I saw where another guy on YouTube interviewed Alessi, the defense attorney, and Yannetti, the other defense attorney. And I wanted to listen to some of that. Let's see. There it is.
Have a bar exam coming up. So they're supposed to be studying for one of the most important exams they're ever going to take.
All right, so this video is like over 5 hours long. So I put the link in the description of our video. So if any of you want to go and watch the full thing, you can. But we are just going to watch what the attorneys said about the case, about the trial. He's talking about how many students helped them in this case.
And they are almost 24/7 working with us on this case. That's first point about it. Second point is the 1 second year who did have a summer position and a good one, basically asked them if she could stay on, and they were great. So first I want to say about them is just the extraordinary commitment that they had. The second thing is they were extraordinarily skilled, some stunningly so, with regard to their savvy, etc. So how were they utilized? It started out sort of legal research, cases, and as people know, I read every case, I read every line, and I was very much impressed with the research. They would give us great material from which we could draft. Some of them drafted some things that we would revise, but they were essentially, Ian, they were essentially functioning at the end as associates in a law firm. That's the level of skill they had, and we were treating them and relying upon them as associates in law firm, despite the fact that I am a partner in a very, very large firm. I brought with me no one, and I had my paralegal, Carol Clark, who's the greatest paralegal who's ever walked the planet, and she and I have worked together for 34 years. I had her, but these interns were absolutely phenomenal, and they were in our hotel toward the end.
Behind the scenes, in terms of what would otherwise be sort of, I don't want to say rudimentary direct examinations, but direct examinations in other cases where you really wouldn't be stressing about it. But my goodness, the time that we spent on every single examination, every oral argument, openings, closings, we all worked together. And, I have to give a lot of credit for the way the team functioned to Karen Reed. Karen, Karen put this team together as well. And she was not the type of person, I'm not going to reveal anything that she said to us, nor can I, and I know you understand that. But just in general, I don't think she'd have an objection if I flatter her. So just in general, I mean, she rolled up her sleeves and, she got really up to speed on, trial strategy, and she knew the police reports and the discovery material better than the lawyers on the team. And nobody wanted to disappoint her. And I can speak for myself. I know Alan and Liza and Bob, I think, felt the same way. We all wanted the result. We wanted to be on those courthouse steps elated. And we knew what we were up against and how difficult a job that was. And I think all of us knew that whosever idea it is, if it's the best idea, it's got to carry the day. And there was nobody on this team who was not open to constructive criticism, to input. I'm proud to have, worked with these attorneys and with Karen and all the interns and everybody we had going on with us. It was a unique experience. I don't think I'll experience it again.
Wow, that was a lot to kind of unpack there. I think that you just cannot get a more star-studded, power-packed bunch of defense attorneys team. Karen Reed, they've said all the way through this that she basically was one of the attorneys. She was defending herself. She knew the case inside and out. They chose the wrong chickadee. Now, I'm not a big Karen Reed fan, y'all. I'll just tell you, I'm not. Personally, I'm not a big Karen Reed fan. I think that the videos that we saw of her that night, I felt like she was all up in the men's faces, and she was probably trying to make John jealous. But that's a human nature thing. When men and women act bad when they start drinking. And like the language she used when she was calling him and leaving him all those voicemails and stuff, she probably wouldn't be who I would hang out with. But that doesn't mean that I think she's guilty. No, she was not. I don't think she was guilty of this crime. It doesn't matter what she was like, what her personality was like. It doesn't matter. I still do not want to see an innocent person go to prison for a crime that they did not commit. And I do not believe that she committed that crime. They chose the wrong chickadee to try and set up, because she fought. Look at what would have happened, y'all. Somebody said the other day, they said if that would have happened to a poor girl, this would not have been the result. And that's true. You think about that. You think about how many women in this area, if they don't have enough money, and now this is going to tie into our next show. So make sure that you come back for our 9 o'clock show. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So if you have money and you can afford to hire that high-priced fixer attorney, which these attorneys weren't fixers. They were just bomb defense attorneys. And there was nothing in this retrial that went her way. There was nothing in the first trial that went her way. In most trials, the judge always, almost always, rules in favor. How do you say it? It's my friend Snail Trail on here. In light, most favorable for the prosecution. Is that right? Because that's exactly what they do. They usually rule in favor of the prosecution, not in favor of the defendant. Well, what happens if you have a public defender? What happens if you have a public defender? Well, number one, they're not getting any kind of, they're not greasing nobody's palm because they ain't got no money. Is that really how it goes? Is it really? Could it be money? In today's society, you would think that that just wouldn't be possible. That there would be kickbacks and bribes and stuff like that that go on in our court systems. You would think that it wouldn't. But you got to remember that everybody in a courtroom works usually. They work together. Like these attorneys, these high dollar attorneys kind of probably came from all over. So I doubt that they work with each other on a regular basis. They all had to come in and meet each other if they didn't already know each other. But when you're dealing with a local court, you're dealing with a prosecutor and a judge and a defense attorney who work together on several other cases and who work together on a daily basis, if not weekly. And so they're constantly in each other's presence. Now, a defense attorney, a local defense attorney who goes in front of a certain judge all the time, if their personalities clash, or if they are making points and say they make the prosecutor look bad, say they make the judge look bad. Are they gonna? They're not gonna do that if they think that that's gonna then hurt them, even if it's gonna benefit their client. I have a hard time believing that they would do anything that would put them in a bad place professionally, even if it means that they think that they're not welcome in the smoking room anymore. What if they're all big buddies in the smoking room? And then all of a sudden everybody starts hanging out, is in the courtroom arguing, competing against each other, and somebody's got to be the winner and somebody's got to be the loser. Well, And then you've got a judge who's going to decide who the winner is and who the loser is. Well, if everything is corrupt, then they already know the outcome before we ever even step foot in the courtroom. But this case did not. The first trial ended up in a mistrial. It ended up in a hung jury. So that means that there were people on that jury that the prosecution was able to fool. And I don't necessarily think that it was that they were able to fool them. I think it was just somebody was on that jury that was the same way as Michael Proctor. That thin blue line, they're standing behind it no matter what.
I don't know that we'll ever see it again. I had a question that was actually brought to me by one of the aunties, one of the trolls on Twitter, and they don't actually realize how clever their question is, because their question was, how do you sleep at night? And the reason why I say it's clever is because I always have trouble, not with the clients you think are guilty. It's the clients that you are certain are innocent. Those are the ones that keep you up at night.
Yes.
So how do you deal with sort of the stress and I guess the burden and the responsibility in a trial like this? How do you just stay sane and keep functional when you're carrying that weight?
Why don't you take that, Bob?
Well, I'm going to let David speak about who sleeps and how they sleep. And
that's true. I can let me just jump in. I can preface it. Nobody knows this, but Bob Alessi does not sleep. I've never met anyone in my life who maybe gets 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, and that is not an exaggeration. He is up and he loves the law so much. He's working, and he has a full life where he accomplishes so much. He's got a beautiful family. He works out like a madman, and he is the amount of work that he gets done is incredible. He makes everybody else feel like a wimp, and
But it doesn't surprise me one bit that Alessi is this kind of person. I've got crushes on them all, man.
So, I don't know how well he sleeps, but it's not because he's troubled by anything that we've done. I think we're very proud of what we've done.
Yeah, with regard to, I sleep like a baby when I sleep. And as David says, I love practicing law. I said to my family years ago, because they asked me why I did what I did, and I said, I've got unbridled enthusiasm for life. I live on the cusp, and I said specifically, the cusp is unbridled enthusiasm for life and psychosis. And my lovely wife Ellen says, there's no cusp, it's all psychosis. I enjoy practicing law, and I don't know what it is. I can honestly say I never feel stress. I never know, nothing is it. I'm kind of a mission focused human being, and I probably have a whole bunch of subconscious stress. But when I'm doing what I love to do with people like David Yannetti, who I love working with, I'm just focused on the mission. So to me, those other emotions, etc., for better for worse, don't enter for me.
The other sort of emotional thing I got to ask about is just, what was it like working across from Hank Brennan? I mean, he's a very different style from Lally, but there was a lot of things that just kind of lead me to think he might have been difficult to work with. The jabs.
Nobody likes Brennan. I don't think anybody likes Brennan. Yeah, he was dirty. I just don't see how he can't be held responsible for even bringing this case. That was his decision to even bring this case in the first place. Isn't it a prosecutor's decision whether they're going to prosecute somebody or not? Did the police bring me a good enough case to take this to court and seek a conviction? And for him to ask a jury to send this woman to prison for the rest of her life and call her a red rummer when she didn't? Shame on him. How does he sleep at night?
I don't know if it felt like it to you, but it felt like it to me and to many of the people in the chat that he was particularly getting Mr. Lessie, your name wrong on purpose. What was it like working sort of, because even though you're opposed, you're still sort of working with somebody to an extent. So what was that like?
David, you want me to take a go at that, or would you like to do it?
No, I'd rather you handle that.
So, what I try to stay away from too much is sort of the personalization of my opponents. This is a wonderful profession, the profession of law. You can do so many good things for clients, for society. And I sometimes look at questions like that, like the office of the president. You may not like who's the president at the current time, but the office is due dignity. And so I sort of look at lawyers that way, and I go in with that presumption. I will say that for my own experience with Attorney Brennan, that it, for the vast majority of the trial, was very good. We got along very well professionally. There were a lot of things behind the scenes that we agreed upon with regard to certain evidence, just to make it more efficient. We didn't generally argue over trite things. And that's what I think skilled lawyers have an obligation to the system to do. Toward the end, it got more challenging for a variety of reasons, I think some of which are just obvious. That hoodie sweatshirt incident changed my perspective with regard to a number of matters. But Attorney Brennan.
Now, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about there, the hoodie sweatshirt. Okay, so Brennan, the prosecutor, had John O'Keefe's shirt. And he was talking about, he was telling the jury, look. And he pointed to holes that were cut in the shirt by the lab. It was holes that were cut by the lab at the direction of the prosecution, I guess. And he was trying to portray that to the jury as something that it wasn't. And so that's what he's taught. And Alessi is the one who caught that. And see, that's kind of that is another example of the things that I'm always talking about. How when these trials are not televised, we don't know what's going on behind that door in the courtroom. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what the what kind of dirt the prosecution is trying to pull, and we don't know what bad rulings the judge is making behind that closed door. That's why it's so important for these processes in the courthouse, in the courtrooms, to be public. That's why it's so important for all of the trials to be public. And if they're not televised, they can get by with so much. Like somebody who used to work in the clerk's office wrote and gave me examples of how they did stuff. And she said that, say one day was set aside for a judge to hear all of one attorney's cases. So no other attorneys have court that day, only this one specific attorney. So if that attorney goes in and there ain't nobody else coming in or out of the courtroom, then that judge and that attorney can go bam, 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 get all their work done on those cases. Now, of course, there's supposed to be a record kept, you know, of all this stuff. But if you don't have anybody in there that's going to cause a ruckus or cause a fuss, if you don't have anybody in there that sees what happens and can go and share that information, then you don't know what took place in that courtroom. It's very, very important.
Was an opponent, and you know, you can code it whatever way you want, but he was the opponent. He's prosecuting our client and asking for her liberty, her freedom to be taken away forever. And in the end, that's the lens through which I need to view any prosecutor, and especially Attorney Brennan. These charges were unjust. They were unwarranted. In my judgment, at the start of the retrial, once people were able to assimilate the evidence and understand it, my hope, even my expectation, was the top line charge should have been withdrawn, the murder two. It wasn't. There were a lot of dynamics, probably extant in the background. But I will conclude with regard to Attorney Brennan that he was and is a skilled attorney. That some of the judgments and the decisions, albeit he's from a different perspective, I just wish they wouldn't have been made, and I wish some different directions would have been taken. But my job and all of our job is to take what is there. You can hope for something different, but I focused more on, this is what's there. That's what's being prosecuted. This is our job. This is our mission. And no matter what came at us, it was our responsibility to find a way to make it work and to make it work for our client.
Well,
representation, but it was attacking the credibility of our expert. One of our key experts, Dr. Wolf, is like, why didn't you talk about the holes in the back of the sweatshirt? Why, didn't you do a good job, in your analysis? So it wasn't just the fact that it was an evidence issue. It was attacking the credibility and competence of our expert. And my third disappointment was the curative instruction not notwithstanding of all of our efforts. So that was just another example of the many challenges that we had in this trial, many of which the public never saw because they were addressed at sidebar. But again, my focus and the team's focus was, okay, that has occurred. We did what we needed to do to protect our client, but now we've got to get from where we are, point A, and we got to go to point B to achieve our goal. So let's keep focused on that and not lament unduly, not whine too much. It's like, okay, back on the horse. Let's get back to what we need to do.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was one thing that I was really, really impressed with, was how they all kept their cool. Because I could not have kept my cool the same way that they did. When the judge was making all of these terrible, terrible rulings and decisions, always in favor of the prosecutor and always at the detriment of the defendant, Karen Reed, I've just made me mad.
Lost the case. My immediate thought was that was the biggest gift.
Here, let's see.
The prosecution. Here we did present alternative theories, so the jury has to resolve those and decide who they believe and how much weight to give their testimony. But my view has always been it's a credibility battle between the lawyers as well. And the one thing you don't want to do as a trial lawyer is to promise something and then not deliver. But even more importantly, say something's true and it turns out it wasn't. And so, Bob, who is, one of the most ethical and moral people I've ever met, I hear when he says, he mourned for the lack of justice. That's coming from inside him. That's completely sincere. For me.
Hush. Hey, no. God, no. Sandy B. Says it was D.A. Morrissey that hired Brennan specifically to prosecute this case. The other prosecutors in his office refused. Over 120 of them paid Brennan over $250,000 to do it. And didn't we see somewhere it was more like 400,000 that Brennan got paid? It was more like 400 or 450,000 that he actually made. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
When that happened, my immediate thought was, I think he just lost the case. My immediate thought was that was the biggest gift we could have been handed in this trial. I wasn't concerned about, was it intentional? Was it an accident? Who knew about it, etc. The optics were terrible. It allowed Alan in closing argument to, sort of rattle off a litany of stuff that was suspect. At the Canton police station was inverted, and they tried to pass it off as not being inverted. The fact that Dr. Welcher said there were no x-rays, when lo and behold, there were x-rays. And I think that's why he wasn't recalled as a witness later on. But over and above those.
And I'm going to even go one step further than what he just did and say they tried to pass off the dog bites as not dog bites. There were too many things in this case that they did that should have shattered ethics violations everywhere. I don't know why people get so comfortable to think that it's okay to do this, but they do.
That moment with the sweatshirt, to me, stood out more than anything. And I thought Alan effectively, in the closing argument, isolated it and pointed it out to the jury to get to the conclusion that you just said, which is, if they're not telling the truth about this, then what else are they not telling the truth about? And by the way, doesn't that play into our whole theory of the case? So those are my thoughts.
You know, Ian, you're a very experienced and skilled trial lawyer, and you astutely point out the loss of momentum and the own goals at the end. And you probably noticed a difference from trial one. We focused a lot in this trial on experts and the battle of the experts, and less of he said, she said, who's telling the truth among the fact witnesses, and more the science. And you know, that is my area. And I believe two things to your astute point. The first is I believe, had the better grasp of the science, the data, the physics, the medicine. I think secondly, importantly, we had the better experts. We had the more knowledgeable people, the people who looked at this using the scientific method.
I'm going to even comment on that too. They had academic people on their side that was analyzing and that were doing the science. On the prosecutor's side, you only had people who were trying to make a theory be fact. Like they were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It just don't fit, you know, it just don't fit. So when you've got people who are the only reason that this evidence has gotten so far is because you had people that were not questioning it. It's kind of like the lie detector test, the polygraph that Ben Fields took, right? He goes and tells the truth in the polygraph for the questions. And so whenever the report is sent to Mickey, then it shows he didn't lie. He passed the polygraph, but we're just not going to look inside the report. We're not going to look past the cover page to see what the answers to questions were. So when you've got people who are backing and supporting that kind of policing and evidence, then whenever you get to court, this is the result. You end up having experts that can come in and follow the evidence, follow the science, do the math, dot the I's, cross the T's, 2 + 2 = 4. And the jury sees that, as opposed to the prosecutor telling them that 2 + 2 = 10. They know better. The jurors could follow the evidence as well, and they could see that the prosecution was lying. I mean, you can't call it anything other than intentional lying.
You know, people probably heard enough from me about confirmation bias and scientific method, but those are important precepts when you come to experts. I thought our experts discharged themselves fantastically in being in honoring the scientific method and being objective. And I think the jury picked up on that. And to your point of the own goal, I'm not sure how much experience the prosecution had with regard to truly cross-examining experts. I cross-examined every one of the Commonwealth's experts.
Did you hear that? I think that was a really, really good point he just made. He said, I don't know how much practice the prosecution had with cross-examining with experts. What do we see so many times? Thank you, Jackie. We see time after time after time these prosecutors bully people into taking plea bargains out of fear, out of being afraid that they're going to have to go serve 30 years in prison for something, whatever. And so people end up taking plea bargains, maybe for stuff that they didn't even do. But lawyers sometimes don't have the experience. There's lawyers all over the place who practice law, but they might not have any criminal law experience. Maybe they've just done like car accidents or personal injury cases and stuff like that. It really matters what background your lawyer has. And what if you don't have an option? What if you only have 2-3 lawyers in your town? So that's the only options you have. But what if you don't get along with none of them? What if you don't like none of them? What if they're all crooks? What are you supposed to do then? What if they're all buddy-buddy with everybody? What do you do? Well, I think you end up having a whole region of people who are just stuck at their mercy. If you've got a membership, thank Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Gifted 5 Hillbilly Crime memberships. And Sunny Days 55. Search a one-of-a-kind trauma doctor, Dr. Marie Russell, to find a June 2000 article by the LA Times. She was as credible as anyone could be. They were dog bites. I think it was common sense that they were dog bites. I think the average person could look at them and see that they were dog bites. Joanne Price, how do you receive a membership? Okay, so any of you all out there who do not know about the memberships, so the way that they work, you have to make sure that you're in your settings. You go to your YouTube settings and make sure that your gifting is turned on. It'll show gifting and it'll be turn on or turn off. Make sure it's turned on. YouTube randomly hands out the memberships to people who are subscribed to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything to hit that little subscribe button on the home page. So make sure that you're subscribed and then go into your settings and turn your gifting on. Also, I just found it when I was going to turn all of my stuff on and I was trying to become a member of Gavin's channel. In my notifications, if you'll go into your phone settings and make sure that your notifications for YouTube is turned on. That's why I wasn't getting any notifications, because I didn't have it turned on for YouTube. So then I finally started getting the notifications. And I've seen several people get memberships 2 and 3 times. The memberships are good for 1 month. And I've seen people get them several times over. So you'll get one as long as you're subscribed and as long as you have your gifting turned on. Miss Crystal says there was a guy in Canton that was found unalive the same night John was. He was only like 100 feet from John's house. Well, that's a big coincidence, isn't it? That sure is a coincidence. I was wanting to look. So this was, oh, well, let's finish listening to him.
It's a different world cross-examining experts, as you know from your vast experience. It's a different world. It's a different skill set. It's a different approach. And if you don't do it the way that is merited by the situation, you can end up with double-digit owned goals. And I think that happened.
I thought it was actually quite striking to see some of the differences, both in the quality of experts, because watching the trial, like really the prosecution expert who I might want to call was Dr. Wolf. If I was sitting here making a list of like who out of this list would I bring on a trial of mine, Dr. Wolf I'd have no problem with, but he was also a big problem because he straight up said, we see this all the time. Somebody falls and this injury and they die. And I went, oh, wow, Brennan, did you not even have a conversation with this guy? But
you're just piggybacking on your comment, Ian, the brilliance of Bob Alessi in terms of his cross-examination of Dr. Wolf. It was one of the most unorthodox starts to a cross-examination that you will see, but it was ingenious and it was done for a reason. It was very clear that their Dr. Wolf was a brilliant man, a very experienced witness and very confident, and he was going to be a big challenge to cross-examine. But if you'll remember, Bob started his cross-examination by introducing himself, saying it's a pleasure to meet you, and tell me about your normal day. And Dr. Wolf was an experienced witness, and he was happy to talk about what he does during the day, including, getting up early and making his wife coffee. And these seem to be the softball questions. And, Bob extended that day into a week, I think. And it was only at that point that, having completely set him up, invited him for dinner and put the plate in front of him, that Dr. Wolf realized the food was actually poison. Because that's when Bob struck, if you recall, and said, geez, that your day is fascinating and you're doing important work, but I didn't hear anything about forensic pathology, which is the topic that he was called on to testify to, And I think at that point, Dr. Wolf realized he had been had, and he got a little angry on the stand and said, well, you could have just asked me if I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm not. But in facing such, he was probably the most difficult witness, or the most formidable witness for us to cross-examine in the whole trial. And I thought it was just brilliant the way he handled that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being around the dinner table with these guys, being able to talk about this stuff, or wherever? I would love just to be a fly on the wall and be able to listen to the stories from inside the courtroom. Just good, triumphing over evil.
A good expert witness is very difficult to cross, and one of the questions I have for you, Bob, is just, if you don't mind me calling you Bob, is how do you manage to learn? Because you were coming in and at points correcting the experts and going, didn't you just use the wrong term? And they'd be like, oh, sorry, yes, I did. You had to cover like 6, 7, 8 different fields in order to be good enough that you can, you know, that the experts sort of also recognize you as an expert, which we didn't see with Brennan. Brennan's trying and they're like, no, you're like a kid in the sandbox. How do you possibly do that?
Well, the first part of the answer is I just love learning. I always have. You know, I went to pharmacy school before law school, so I had every chemistry, physics, calculus known to man. And I enjoyed all of it except for calculus. I never enjoyed it. But I just enjoy learning. I enjoy technical STEM type issues. And I'll stay up all night to read about them and to learn them. And it's a joy for me to do. I have in my career, like the best experts, I feel like I get mini master's degrees just by working with brilliant people. And the fact that I don't sleep much allows me to have about 1.7 times a life than others. So I get more time to prepare. It's like the person who takes the exam gets extra time. That's me. And
I'm envious.
I just enjoy it. When you enjoy what you're doing, you're gonna learn. And God gave me a little bit of facile with some technical issues and great experts to work with, and also a great team. You know, it's when you've got a team like the team we had, that I don't know if it will ever be repeated. What happens is I'm doing that. I'm in a course were absolutely stellar. I could probably list them all by first name. They would greet you professionally. Every once in a while,
3 smart lawyers and Dave in a conference room, you know, working through it as well. But the, you know, the addition of these people who were so invested in our defense and trying to help out and sort of seeing things from a different perspective, it benefited us.
Yeah, I want to build on what David said quickly and just say, in the type of cases I try, and I'm fortunate to try some heavy high stake cases, I call them sort of like COVID cases. Remember COVID, there were the big basketball games or football games, big games on, and you look in the audience and there's nobody there. So, you know, when I'm trying like whatever, a trademark case or patent, whatever it is, you know, you don't have this much attention for these cases. So social media's impact on a case, this was a little bit new for me. And so I have a large firm and we've got a social media team, and they were monitoring what was going on. And in some ways, it's just writ large of the jury. It could be representative. So 2 functions to me were, as David said, the information we were getting. There was just some great ideas and some great thoughts, but also sort of a barometer. Are we landing what we're trying to do? And I haven't had that benefit from many trials. Is not that it's statistically significant all the time, but I will also say, lastly, that I didn't have much time to do it, but I will tell you, I would tune in to Ian Runkle and see what he had to say and see what his thoughts were. I would tune into Andrea Burkhart, Peter Tragos, the defense diaries, these 2 detectives, forensic detectives, Ron and Paul, whoever they are. I would tune into them. You know, Ted Daniel, what's he hearing out on the street? And I could go on and on and on. The brother counsel, there are just so many. And to me, it was just like a big library. I didn't have time to read all the books, but sometimes I would pick up some. And so I think, you know, I'll speak for myself. Social media gave me more tools and more information, and I'm very grateful. And I am completely impressed with the level of astuteness and intelligence out there.
That's what I keep saying, guys. Social media has changed the landscape, and it's changed the landscape of how we receive our information and our news, but it's also going to transform our criminal justice systems as well, because of showing, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's going to be because of showing, televising these trials and these court proceedings. We are finally able to see a much needed, more transparent vision of, I think more people are going to learn how the justice system works just through an entertainment and an educational perspective through social media.
Did you notice a difference in sort of, I guess, vibe between like the commentary online versus the commentary from like mainstream media and some of the more institutional, I guess, media?
Oh, completely. And I'm going to give an excuse for mainstream traditional media that they may not deserve, but they are soundbite news people, right? They have 30 seconds a minute. And the more modern, if you will, podcasters, YouTubers, lawtubers, you just get more extended conversations, right? And so the vibe to me is there's a greater depth with regard to what I call the more modern media. And I will say, unfortunately, and I hope I don't have an undue bias, I just thought the mainstream media wasn't accurately reporting what really the facts were, where the case was going. I'll
tell you what, I went over to Court TV, I'll say, and on one day that we weren't showing, we didn't do a stream for some reason. I don't remember what the reason was, but I pulled up Court TV, and it might have been through a deliberation, or it might have been through a lunch break or something, but it had one of their anchors on. And honey, that anchor was just gushing over John O'Keefe's mom and his family. And she kept going on about the people that were sitting over there with his family, like the Alberts and Jen McCabe, and how close Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts had become since this happened. And she really seemed to me like she was sticking her nose up at Karen Reed, like she was guilty. And it just surprised me so much.
I just didn't get the sense, with one exception, or maybe two exceptions, that, it was more than just a vibe. It was, they were maybe trying to manufacture a vibe that just really wasn't represented by the facts. So my perspective was, I really think that because of the beauty of Ian, what you and your colleagues in your industry do, you're not able to do that. You're going to have somebody with a super chat or some other they're going to come right at you.
Yeah.
So I just like the whole vibe of the check and balance that exists in the more modern atmosphere. And, you got to go on and face everybody on your shows. Whereas some executive producer at pick your major network, they're not accountable, right? And they can push a narrative, or they can maybe keep, soundbitey. And so for all those reasons, I think there's a different vibe. And one of the reasons why, and David, of course, will speak for himself, is we're on your show and will probably be on other shows, is because I just think the vibe you give people is pretty simple. Accuracy. It's more accurate.
And the other thing I'll just say, I've been a criminal defense lawyer for ages, and you go to a party and you always get what I call the party question. You know, it's somebody who's up in your face about how can you possibly do that? And one of the things I've seen change, a number of people in my chat have said, hey, I never thought that I'd have heroes who were criminal defense lawyers. Like, that to me is such a huge change, and that's you guys. Like, that is, you know, and I know you're saying I'm not going to, you know, toot my own horn, but you guys really are like legitimate heroes in a way that, you know, I guess it's hard to sort of explain to the average person the sense of like, you guys actually were in a situation where you saw somebody in trouble and stepped in, many of you with like, not just no financial interest, but like at a loss, and were able to like, I have some skills, I have some, you know, and I'm gonna, you know, step up. I guess, you know, you guys, how does it feel sort of to be that, you know, that sort of hero to many, many people nowadays?
So can I take the first crack at that, Bob? Yeah, I mean, I would give some pushback that where anything you know, special in terms of being heroes, or you know, that there's something unique about us. I don't think that's the case. I think that this team is talented and dedicated, and generally smart, despite my inclusion on the team. But I think that there are a lot of other attorneys who could do what we do. If you came down, Ian, and you were hired for this case, you would have stepped in seamlessly. And there are a lot of other attorneys who would do the same thing. So I look at it more as we were doing our job, and we were incredibly fortunate to have a case that galvanized the public because everyone recognized the injustice. So, you know, it wasn't, I mean, it certainly makes me feel so good that I was representing someone in whom I saw her innocence, and I saw the injustice, and maybe I was able to help out in some small way in terms of trying to correct that. But you know, I don't buy into this. You know, all of a sudden I'm something special. I don't feel that way. I feel like I did my job. And the second aspect of this is that you know, putting that aside, it's surreal to be in this situation. Surreal. I don't know if you probably never got down to the courthouse. You just saw the you know, the videos outside because you're so far away.
We could hear the roar from inside the courtroom camera.
My goodness. I mean, to have you know, the adoring public clamoring for your attention or some type of connection. I mean, I'm not used to that. I'm you know, I'm not somebody that seeks out that limelight. I'm you know, if I'm at a party, I'm generally in a corner having a private conversation as opposed to working the crowd. You know, I think the other members of my team may have a little different perspective, but you know, I so appreciated being in this position. I had such love for everybody that showed up. I mean, I was blown away by the people that would take time out of their day and wait for us to come out of the courthouse. And, you know, the crowds kept getting bigger and bigger. And I will never in my life forget the feeling walking out of that courthouse after we won and seeing the throngs of people lining the streets with signs and giving us the I love you sign in sign language. And I had such love in my heart for everybody, and I was drinking it in. I was trying to make eye contact with everybody in that crowd. I just wanted to make a connect. I would have kissed everybody in that crowd if I could. And I'll never forget it. It was such a special experience.
My perspective is similar, but a little different in some ways than David's. Similar in that the real heroes in my mind are those people who put on the uniform for their country, don't make a lot of money,
Exactly.
sacrifice their lives, be it a first responder, a military person. They literally put their lives on the line, and they may not see their family when they come home. And so to me, I have a special and limited definition of a hero. However, I do view ourselves as a step down below heroes, but somewhat of an elevated status. And I view that as being a vessel, being privileged to take on the desires, the wants, and the cries for justice of the millions of people who have watched this trial and watched what happened. So in that regard, I almost feel somewhat like an avatar for everybody. And so with that comes a responsibility to work hard, do good, because we're the only thing between those folks and just disappointment. And so I consider it a stepping up. There are significant financial sacrifices. Everybody on this team made personal financial sacrifices. I'm not going to go into the details, but they're real. And however, and David has heard me say this before, there are different kinds of income in my mind. There's monetary income that everybody knows about. There's psychic income, which gives you a feeling of joy in what you're doing. And then there's spiritual income. And whether it's religious or just whatever spiritual, that's income. And I will tell you for myself, the spiritual income from being able to work on this case, to be a vessel through which millions of people could exist and see that we're every one of them. We have some skill sets that we can do maybe a little bit more, but many people, as David said, did so many things and sacrificed. Also, I felt that there's a limited number of attorneys in my mind who would actually end up doing this. And so I want to credit my team members. And I never heard anybody once in the many months. And
you're about to get to where I was about to, I think.
Yeah, I just came on the second trial. David Yannetti, Alan Jackson, Liza Little. This was their second. And no one ever mentioned one peep about how this is affecting me in whatever way. So I want to give credit particularly to my co-counsel for the sacrifices they made, and a step down below hero, but maybe a little bit more than your average person.
All right. We'll go ahead and end that. And I'm going to take a few minutes before we start our next show. Come right back in 30 minutes and we're going to start our second show. We've got some new stuff, some new information, but some old information for this next one. So the links to all of these are in the description. So if any of y'all want to go and watch the full thing, you can go to it that way. And I'll see you here in just a little bit. Thanks to everybody who helped with the goal. We're going to try to hit it again on our next one. D Ness became a YouTube member. Sandy B, thank you, $10. $20 super sticker, thank you. Jackie gifted 5 Hillbilly memberships. Sunny Days 55, $10 super chat. Ms. Vicky, $4.99 for the goal. And rounding up, last but not least, Truth and Transparency, our girl. Thank you so much. we are behind on our supers big time, y'all. So everyone helps. Okay, guys, I will see you here in about 25 minutes. All right. Peace out, Girl Scout. Bye.